Is it going to explode in the form and fashion that things are going to happen outside? You know, something you may see. Matter of fact, here's one for you. There's a term that has been derived from people who lost their jobs after being there for some time, and I believe it originated with post office workers, you know, mailmen, etc., etc. And it says going postal, you know. So if these emotions that we're going through are built up to the point where now there's that explosion, and this explosion is made manifest outwardly, are we going to go postal? Now, going postal can mean that it could be detrimental to somebody that we care about. It can even be detrimental to us. You know, some people, that these emotions explode, and then they end up, again, acting impulsively, possibly committing suicide or attempting to commit suicide, doing some other self-injurious act. Okay? Or, and those are the options if it happens outwardly. Or does it explode if something happens inwardly, where now we become numb? Think about it. You have some people out there, because of the traumatic experiences that they've been through, because not having a healthy outlet to discuss these issues, they hold on to these emotions, but now it changes them. It affects their personality and who they are as individuals. It exploded. It may not have, I shouldn't even say exploded, I should say imploded, because it's something that happens inside of them. You have the explosion where it affects people around you and even yourself, physically speaking. Then you have the implosion. It's still the same thing. You're like that soda bottle being shook up. But implosion now, something happens to your personality. You become this broken individual. People can see it. You can be the grumpy individual that people refer to as being mean and nasty all the time. You can be that depressed individual that people just see being sad and down all the time, etc. But how will it affect you? Again, and the point being, how in the Word, the Creator has given us healthy outlets when we have these feelings. Who would have thought? You know, and it's something that the Most High helped me to see recently, you know, in regard to the psychology of humanity. You know, when we think about the Most High, and a lot of times we think about, quote-unquote, God in a strictly religious aspect, but the Creator is also a psychologist. He is the one who built this physical body and filled it with His breath. And by His breath, He imparts to us everything that we do and experience with our mind. The whole process of reasoning, all of the emotions, He is aware of it. He knows these things because He experiences these exact same emotions. He gets happy. He gets sad. He gets angry. Some people say, well, how in the world can a God do? See, people lose sight. We are created in His image and likeness. He experiences these things. So we experience these things. He observes us. So from observation, He knows what can be helpful to us. But what we have to learn to do is to simply take heed to His Word. Now, because we're talking about sacrificial system, is it being implied that we need to offer sacrifice? No, that's not what's being implied. This is what was offered during that time. We're in a new time frame right now in regard to His Word. We're in another stage of development as far as His Word goes, which we're going to get into. Okay, because one of the things that we're leading up to in regard to the sacrifices, all the sacrifices that we're learning about, this entire sacrificial system points to something else. Okay? So, that being said, when it comes to the trespass offering, this is a special kind of sin offering introduced in the Torah and concerned with offenses against Elohim and man that could be estimated by a monetary value and thus covered by compensation or restitution accompanying the offering. Okay, and we're going to get into some examples of that in a moment. Okay, but first what we're going to see are some other instructions in regard to the trespass offering. So let's pick back up in Leviticus chapter 5 and verse 7, which reads, "And if he be not able to bring..." Oh, let me go back up. I'm sorry, I skipped something. Oh no, I didn't. But before I read that, let me start at verse 6 and read into that. Matter of fact, let me start at verse 5 again and read into that so we can get the context and keep that in place. Alright, Leviticus chapter 5 and verse 5. "And it shall be, when he shall be guilty, asham, in one of these things, that he shall confess that he hath sinned in that thing. And he shall bring his ashma unto Yahweh for his sin which he hath sinned, a female from the flock, a lamb or a kid of the goats for a kata'at, which is sin offering, and the priest shall make an atonement for him concerning his sin. And if he be not able to bring a lamb, then he shall bring for his trespass which he hath committed 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons unto Yahweh, one for a kata'at, sin offering, and the other for an olah, burnt offering. And he shall bring them unto the priest, who shall offer that which is for the kata'at first, and wring off his hair from his neck, but shall not divide it asunder." Now, when it comes to the birds, one of the things that you find that you're not supposed to cut the birds up, whereas when it comes to the other animals, you're supposed to cut. Now, what's interesting, we learned that in Leviticus chapter 1. If you can go back and read the instructions for the olah, verses 14 through 17, it gives that in regard to the birds. But what's also interesting that this practice was also shown to be known and observed by Abraham. Now in Genesis chapter 15 and verse 8, and reading through verse 10, it reads, "And he said, Adonai Yahweh, whereby shall I know that I shall inherit it? And he said unto him, Take me an heifer of 3 years old, and a she-goat of 3 years old, and a ram of 3 years old, and a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. And he took unto him all these, and divided them in the midst, and laid each piece one against another, but the birds divided he not." Okay? Interesting that they had that information even back then. Alright, so let's pick back up. Let's go to Leviticus chapter 5 and verse 9. Now what's happening, he's given the specific instructions regarding the trespass offering. Alright? It says, "And he shall sprinkle of the blood of the kata'at upon the side of the altar, and the rest of the blood shall be wrung out at the bottom of the altar. It is a kata'at. And he shall offer the second for an olah, according to the manner." When it says according to the manner, when you go back to Leviticus chapter 1, he gave the specific instructions on how to offer the burnt offerings, depending on what you're offering. Okay? "And the priest shall make an atonement for him for his sin which he hath sinned, and it shall be forgiven him." Verse 11. "But if he be not able to bring 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, then he that sinned shall bring for his korban the 10th part of an ephah of fine flour for a kata'at. He shall put no oil upon it, neither shall he put frankincense thereon, for it is a kata'at, or a sin offering. Then shall he bring it to the priest, and the priest shall take his handful of it, even a memorial thereof, and burn it on the altar, according to the Eshe, fire offering unto Yahweh. It is a kata'at. And the priest shall make an atonement for him as touching his sin, that he hath sinned in one of these. And it shall be forgiven him, and the remnant shall be the priest, as a meat offering, or mincha. Okay, now just briefly, another point we want to take a look at briefly, third time I said that. Anyway, another point, when it came to these offerings, and this ties into how the Kohanim and the Levim, the priests and Levites, were taken care of. Not only did Israel provide a tenth of whatever it is that they were growing or harvesting in regard to the crops, in regard to the animals, but when they offered these sacrifices outside of the whole burnt offering, when they had animals and they had to cut certain pieces off and put on the altar, the remaining pieces of that animal, but outside of what Yahweh said to destroy, belonged to the priest. Now think about this, and I believe we talked about this before. If you're going to offer a sheep, you have wool on that sheep. You're going to cut that wool off. You're going to make with that wool any type of garment that you can make. Same thing with a cow or a bull. I believe, if I remember correctly, this is where we get our leather from. This is where we get our suede from. Okay? So you have all of these different means by which the Most High is taking care of his leaders. And I just thought that was interesting in light of what this passage said, how, and the remnant shall be the priest. You know? Now, on another note, when we look at it, depending on the status of the individual, determine what it is that you could offer. And I believe we looked at that as well. You know? So, if you had money, you know, you were able to offer the lamb or the kid of the goats. If you didn't have as much money as the person who had that, then you were given the option of the 2 turtle doves or the 2 pigeons. If you didn't have enough finances to cover that, then he said, just give me the amount of meal for the mincha. But I thought that was interesting because, again, when you look at the justice of the Most High, it's like contrary to our day and time. You know, and let me use this as an example. And let me make this point first. The justice of the Most High. Whatever financial state you in, I have a means where you can be taken care of. Okay? You won't feel left out. Okay? Now, in contrast to our current justice system, a person who doesn't have money, matter of fact, there's a documentary, I believe it's on Netflix. What is this young man's name? I think his last name is Browder or something like that. I can't remember his first name, forgive me. But it was a young man who was incarcerated for something he didn't even do. But because he could not afford to make bail, they kept him locked up. I mean, sad story, tragic ending. Eventually, he does get let go. But because of the traumatic experiences that the young brother went through while he was incarcerated, when he should not have been incarcerated, he eventually takes his life. And that goes back to the example we said earlier. You know, that bottle being shaken up. You never know. People go through these things and it builds and it builds and it builds and it builds. Next thing you know, there's that explosion. In this young man's case, the explosion was him taking his own life. Why? Because of an unjust system. That's why. And why is that message important? Because the kingdom of Yah, the government of Yah is at hand. That's why. That is the message year in, year out. The kingdom and government of Yah is at hand. There does not exist a righteous government on this planet. Look at what just happened over there in the state of Israel. Look at what's happening in our very own government. Unjust. Okay? Whereas the Torah establishes justice for all, literally and truthfully speaking. Okay? So let's move on. So let's pick up now. in Leviticus chapter 5 and verse 14. Now he's going to get more details in regard to the laws for Asham, or the guilt or trespass offering. And Yahweh spoke unto Moshe, saying, if a soul commit a trespass and sin through ignorance, and we talked about that term ignorance, okay, in the holy things of Yahweh, then he shall bring for his trespass unto Yahweh a ram without blemish out of the flocks, with thy estimation by shekels of silver. And this is the part we were talking about when it comes to the guilt offering, how it's also going to be accompanied by some type of monetary fine. After the shekel of the sanctuary for an asham, or trespass offering. And he shall make amends for the harm that he hath done in the holy thing, and shall add the fifth part thereto, and give it unto the priest. And the priest shall make an atonement for him with the ram of the asham, and it shall be forgiven him. And if a soul sin, and commit any of these things, which are forbidden to be done by the commandments of Yahweh, though he knew it not, yet is he guilty, and shall bear his iniquity. Now this is another passage in verse 17 that I found to be very interesting. And we're going to see something that Mashiach said in context of that. Let me say that again. Verse 17. And if a soul sin, and commit any of these things which are forbidden to be done by the commandments of Yahweh. Now, when it says things that are forbidden to be done, you get into the do's and the don'ts. Okay? Thou shalt do this, thou shalt not do that. So when it says the thing that's forbidden to be done, thou shalt not do that. If you break any of those commands, this is what he's referring to. Okay? But listen to what he says here. Though he knew it not, yet is he guilty, and shall bear his iniquity. Again, ignorance of the Torah is not justification for breaking a command. Well, I didn't know. You know, a lot of times people want to say, well, I didn't know. Listen to what it says here. Now we're going to look at something Mashiach said. And that servant which knew his master's will, and prepared not, neither did according to his will, shall be beaten with many. I'm talking about with many stripes. But he that knew not, and did commit things worthy of stripes, shall be beaten with few. See? Same thing. So when you get into some people who say that the Messiah brought forth some new brand of religion, that's a lie. In many different aspects, what you find is Mashiach teaching the Torah. He just taught what we just read in Leviticus 5:17. If you know to do something right and you don't do it, it's sinful to you. You're going to be beaten with many stripes because you know better. If a person doesn't know and still break the same law, guess what? You're still going to be punished, not just as harshly as the person who knew. Think about this. And some people may say, how you just say God was just and this, that, and the other, and He going to punish somebody for doing something they didn't know. Here's the thing. He said few. So that's the graciousness and the mercifulness. He's not punishing them equivalently. Okay? Second thing. If you, and I'm trying to think of something simple. I was going to say a traffic law, just for example's sake. Okay? Let's say you're new to the country, not quite understanding when it says speed limit. So you're going 50 miles per hour in a zone that says 25 miles per hour, right? Unaware that this is the speed limit. Let's just say, for example's sake, that sign was not able to be seen or something along those lines. Even though you didn't know that was the law, are you still guilty of breaking that law? If you're going 50 miles per hour in a 30 or 25 mile per hour zone, you're still guilty of breaking that law. Now, the officer, after pulling you over, if you should get pulled over, and you explaining to that officer, he may be leaning to you and say, go. And, make sure you keep your mind on the speed limit. Now, depending on who you're dealing with, I remember we were coming from New York years ago, and the driver of the vehicle that we were all in got pulled over. That officer hit him with a $500 speeding ticket. So it's as if you know better. So you got hit with a large ticket. Whereas somebody that didn't know, and there's a little joke that we were told, matter of fact, in connection to that whole incident, and the way that the joke went, if I remember correctly, you have a foreigner new to the country, and he's speeding. He's going 95, but the speed limit said that it's 60. So he gets pulled over by the officer, and the officer said, sir, why were you going, 95 miles per hour? And the guy that was driving said, well, I was trying to go 95. I was trying to go as fast as I can go, because the sign said 95, and I was trying to go as fast, of course, but he wasn't looking at the speed limit sign. He was looking at the I-95 sign. So of course that was a little joke and thing like that. But the officer, because of that, he let him go because he didn't quite understand. But he was still guilty of breaking the law, which is why the officer pulled him over in the first place. But anyway, that being said, my apologies if I wasted your time with all of that. It wasn't my intention. But hopefully everybody got a better understanding when he says, when you know to do good and don't do it, you're going to be beaten with many stripes. If you don't know to do good and you don't do it, you're going to still be beaten, but with few stripes. Okay? Let's pick up in Leviticus chapter 5 and verse 18. And he shall bring a ram without blemish out of the flock with thy estimation for an asham unto the priest. And the priest shall make an atonement for him concerning his ignorance wherein he erred and knew it not, and it shall be forgiven him. It is an asham, a trespass offering. He hath certainly trespassed against Yahweh. Okay, and we're going to go into chapter 6, and we're going to go down to verse 7 because it connects. Okay, verse 1. And Yahweh spake unto Moshe, saying, if a soul sin and commit a asham, trespass against Yahweh. I'm sorry. That word trespass is a different term. My apology. Let me start over. Verse 2. If a soul sin and commit a trespass against Yahweh. Now that word translated as trespass, as was stated, is a whole different word. Let me put this word up here for you. And this is, again, the word trespass in verse 2, Leviticus 6:2. And it comes from number 4604. And that word is ma'al. Okay? Now what the word ma'al means, it means treachery. And it's important that we understand this for what we're about to read. Treachery is defined as willful betrayal. Let me see. Willful betrayal of fidelity. Basically, you're talking about breaking somebody's trust. Okay? In other words, what the Most High expects of His people is for us to be trustworthy. In other words, worthy of being trusted. This is what the Torah teaches. So listen to what he says. Again, Leviticus 6:2. If a soul sin and commit a ma'al, treachery, against Yahweh, you hear that? And commit treachery against Yahweh. But listen to what the treachery is. That's why we emphasizing this. You commit the treachery against the creator of the heavens and the earth by doing these things. And lie unto his neighbor in that which was delivered him to keep. If you do that, it's not just the neighbor that you offended. You are committing treachery against the creator. Listen to what he said. And in this particular one, I'm not going to get into the details and get into long, drawn-out explanations of it. I'm just going to give you a basic idea of what it is. Safekeeping. Somebody gives you something to keep for them, and you lie about it. Okay? And lie unto his neighbor in that which was delivered him to keep, or in fellowship. Now, what this is talking about, you're talking about a business deal. Y'all make an agreement. You know, now you have the process of going through the paperwork and, you know, signing on a dotted line. In those days, it was the honor system, handshake. You know? But see, what people fail to realize, in your mind, this person think I'm really going to pay them back. I ain't going to pay them that money back. In your mind, you thinking that. But the creator, he looking at all of this. You may be saying in your mind, this person you shaking their hand, you saying all this negative in your mind. This person that you shaking the hand of, they may not know that you're saying it, but the creator know that you're saying it. He hears those thoughts. And it's treachery to him for when you do that. Listen to what it says. It says, or in a thing taken away by violence. Now you're talking about robbery. Now you're talking about taking something by force from an individual. You're robbing them. Or have deceived his neighbor. Now what this is talking about is withholding funds. Okay? Withholding funds that you're supposed to give to this individual. You're lying to them, oh, I ain't got it. I don't have it. I can't do nothing today. Call me next week, etc. Whatever the excuse may be. Treachery to the Most High. It says, or have found that which was lost, and lieth concerning it. Lost items. You got this thing that the person lost, and the person comes to you about it, and you say, no, I haven't seen it. Treachery to Yahweh. Keep these things in mind. And it has something to do with our relationship with our fellow man. Think about that. But it's treachery to Yahweh. And swear falsely. Okay, let me read all this together. Starting in verse 1 again. Leviticus 6:1. And Yahweh speaketh to Moshe, saying, if a soul sin and commit a trespass against Yahweh, and lying to his neighbor,